Hey everybody, hope you're all alright out there. Today I want to talk about some camera stuff, and particularly remote releases or custom remote releases for photography and for video work. If you don't watch my channel regularly, I make motorcycle content mostly, and when I do the reviews I tend to do a little montage of the look of the bike at the beginning of the video, to show the looks of the bike, and then I move into the review, which is mostly on bike, so you don't get to see the bike so much, so it's important to show the bike to start with, which is why I do the montages. Up until now I've been filming it with this little camcorder because it's convenient. It's small, it's got image stabilizing, it's good enough. However, because I've upgraded the other cameras I'm using over the time, the quality of this camera, when it's next to the other cameras, it shows that it's a little bit lower. It's fine on its own, but it's when you do that compare and contrast that you realise, oh, that's quite a bit less sharp than the other cameras that I'll be using for the rest of the video. So, I've decided I'm going to give up on it being simple and carrying a small little camera with me. I want to get quality, so I've started setting up, or have set up, a rig to use my digital SLR to record stuff. This is a 90D with a Canon 10 to 18mm lens on it. The frame, or the rig, with the rails and everything, is made by a company called Neewer. I have actually worked with them in the past, but I bought this myself. They don't actually seem to respond to my emails anymore, so whatever. I still like your products, so I guess I'll just buy them. Now, you use these, obviously, because it gives you more stability in your shots. Wider means you can hold things flatter. That's why you put cups of tea on a tray, because the wider it is, it reduces the amount of movement of the cup on the tray. It's not just so you can carry more cups, believe it or not. Anyway, sometimes when I'm filming I want to use continuous autofocus, so it's always focusing on what it's pointing at. Sometimes I want to have it at a set focus, so I will half press to get it where I want, and then I can move the camera around and the depth of field, is going to bring a certain area in and out of focus. It's set focal distance. Well, to choose to do that, I have to take my hand off of here and move it onto the side of the camera. Well, that obviously ruins the balance of it. You could wobble the camera in the middle if you're doing that while you're actually filming, and I thought it would be cool to have a remote release of some sort here, so I didn't have to take my hand off and I could autofocus the camera and fire it if I wanted to. Now, they do make remote releases like this one, Canon does. This one's about 15-20 quid, and it's the same as the on the camera. Half press for autofocus, full press to take the picture. Well, the reason I have two switches is I've basically separated those two functions. So autofocus can be done independently on one, and firing the shutter, well, autofocus and then fire the shutter, is done on the other. If I found a button that had a half press and a full press, I could just have one button here, but there is an advantage to having it not fire. Sometimes you want to be able to press, just to get autofocus, and with not having my hand on here, I don't have the same sort of dexterity. So unless the button itself had a click, but then you wouldn't want it clicking. So having these separated into, well, I'll show you now, because I've separated the two, the right hand side one, that is doing the autofocus, but it won't fire the shutter. If I do want to fire the shutter, I can use the other side. Simple. My original intention was to basically take the button out of this and mount it somehow into the handle of this, but then I realised this is not what you would think inside. This is both very simple and very clever at the same time. I love little designs when I find them like this. I came in here at 1 o'clock in the morning, I left at 3:30, and I made this. As you can see, the two buttons are mounted up there. It then comes out here. The cable runs down underneath here, which has been zip tied in, and it comes out as a stereo 2.5mm jack. Just a standard 2.5mm jack, but stereo. They do sell handles and grips and things with buttons like this incorporated into them, but they're normally incredibly expensive. The only expensive thing here is the camera. That's, that's a pretty expensive piece of kit. This cage and the shade, because I'm using the 10 to 18mm lens, it's very prone to flare. It's handy to have this on here. This and this, I think, was less than 60 quid, as I say, from Neewer. I'll put it on my Amazon store in the description. They will be affiliated links, but as I say, this is not a video that I've been given the product. I bought it because I use Neewer stuff and I like it, and it's good enough for the price. Anyway, if you are now thinking, that looks very handy, I would love to have one of those on my rig, I will show you how you make it, and I'll also show you inside here, because it's very simple and interesting, and it explains exactly how this works. I don't actually have a spare 2.5mm stereo jack to show you, so I'm going to take this thing apart and then desolder it, and then I can resolder it afterwards to put it back together, but I don't actually use this anymore. This is from... I got this with my Canon EOS 50E. That is a 35mm film SLR, not digital SLR. That was my first good camera, as I thought. It was a good camera. It was a good camera in the 50E. Anyway, let's just take this apart. Yeah, the design of this is incredibly simple, and it suddenly made me realise, wait a minute, these remote shutters should never be as expensive as they are. It's just silly. So, you're probably expecting there to just be a press button here, yeah? Because you've got half press for autofocus, full press for shutter release, and on this one you can slide it forward and that pins it for bulb mode, so continuous exposure. Well, no. The thing's full up. And this is where I instantly realised how this thing works. You see, 3 wires will come off of this. You have ground, left and right. That's why you have 3 sections on the pin. That band is an insulation layer that's separating different areas. So you'll have, I don't know if, well, I'll find out in a minute. I think the end one might be ground, and then you might have left and right if it was audio. But in this, it's going to be ground A and B. It may not be the same as audio. We'll find out in a second. But point is, I'm sure you know for a circuit to work, it needs to be complete. You can't have any gaps in it. Well, the negative, or the ground, is this bottom piece of metal here. And you'll notice they're separated by an insulation layer, and the cable is soldered to the bottom plate. When you half press, it moves that bottom plate up to the second plate, which then engages with this cable, which is soldered onto that plate individually, and that gives you your autofocus because it's the half press. So it's like the equivalent of a left channel or a right channel. Let's say channel A. In fact, if I pull this cable out, yeah, there we go, I can show you a lot better. Bottom plate, autofocus. Then when you fully press, it hits the top one, and then that hits the shutter release. And this is how it pins that in place. It's just pinning these pieces of metal together. That is because that is the other channel, and that channel will cause the camera to autofocus, then fire straight away. But because this over here is got the ground on it, and it's connected to this, when you press all 3, it's then gone to the ground and it can fire the camera. As I say, I think this is an absolutely fantastic solution to a problem. It's very simple. I mean, if you drop it, it could well fire on its own because the inertia of these could make them touch, so that's something. But the simplicity of it means that this is very unlikely to break in any way. I mean, I guess the switch mechanism could wear out. That's the thing that's going to go before anything else. Okay, if we touch the top 2 together, nothing happens. If we touch all 3 together, it fires. So we can say that the bottom one is ground, and then you've got the 2 channels above it. Okay, so if I put this on the first stage, what's that one connected to? Okay, so ground actually appears to be the first part. What would be autofocus is the middle part of the plug, and the end will be shutter release. Just double check that by touching this one here. Nothing happens, nothing happens. Ground, autofocus, shutter release. Nice and easy to understand. So obviously you can buy long releases. You could just use an extension on something like this. You can use Wi-Fi releases, you can even use your phone to monitor and release the camera. But sometimes, like with this rig, you just want an old school button, and you want a simple one that's not going to be a half press, you know, because you haven't got the same dexterity on holding on to like that. I want to be able to just mash that thing down and only get autofocus. Now it shouldn't be a problem in video to press the main shutter button, because on this Canon it doesn't actually start and stop the video, that's a separate button. But if I wanted it to, I think I can custom program that so it does turn on and off for that. But the point is, the reason I want them both here is I also use it for stills, and rather than take it out of the rig when I've got to take a few pictures, you know, for thumbnails and stuff, I can just use it in the rig, click, 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 nice and easy. Takes up no real extra space. Simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder that so I have a cable, and then I'm going to show you how you can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly make a 2-button long, extension for this. I'm using way oversized cable. I'm not keeping this thing, I'm just demonstrating to you. You can use really thin cables for this, like this, because it's such low voltage. But this will work, it'll be fine. So I'm going to connect what I'm calling the negative, but the ground, the black one, to this. So if I take the other end of that negative and I touch it to the red one, that will give this autofocus. And if I touch the other side, it's going to give us shutter release. Okay? Simple. That's it. Carry on. Alright, I'll make it slightly better than this. If you can find a small enough switch that has the half press, full press functionality, then you can just have one switch. It will have 3 cables coming off of it rather than 2. Where I'm using individual ones, I'm going to be pairing these up. So the negatives, the black cables from each switch. So we've taken the ground from that cable and it comes to here. Now I've taken the 2 black cables from the switches and I'm just going to solder these together. This is not a permanent fix, as you can tell. This is just so I can demonstrate. So now the negative's soldered on, we need 2 separate cables. I'm afraid they are both red. That is not going to help things in this example, but I'm going to have to deal with it. So this red is going to go to the red of this switch, and this will end up being our autofocus button. So the ground is going to this switch on the black wire, and the red one, which was the autofocus, which is the middle section of the 2.5mm stereo jack plug, is autofocus. So if we press this, we should hear. Hopefully that's registering. It is autofocusing. So we've now soldered the second red wire to the other switch. I know this looks like a bit of a mess, but it's just a test example. So the first section closest to where you hold on the 2.5mm stereo jack plug is the ground, and that goes to both blacks on the switches. Then the red one in this example is the middle section, and that gives you your autofocus, and then the end of the pin, the first bit that goes in when you plug it in, that is the other side, and that gives you your shutter release. So that means one of our buttons does autofocus and the other does the shutter. The neatest way to do this would be to find a solderable 2.5mm male jack plug stereo, then get some 3-core cable, not big fat 3-core, small 3-core, solder it as so, then you won't have all this going down there, because you need 3 cables, remember? Left channel, right channel, ground. As you can see, both grounds connected to the same cable, the other one's connected individually, and then autofocus, fire. So that's the ground, comes out and it goes to the ground or one side of the switch. It doesn't matter because you're just connecting, but one side on both switches. Best to match, so go for black. Then the one that is the autofocus needs to come out and go to this side, and then the one for the firing needs to come out and go to this side. I'm not good at drawing circuits, okay, but you should be able to follow this. These are the switches. This is the thing. So what we're actually doing here is we're connecting A with ground or B with ground. So obviously ground is connected to both. If you press the button on A, it connects that circuit and it does the autofocus, and if you do the one for B, it's going to again connect that circuit and do the shutter release. That is all there is to it. So if you can find a switch which has got a half press function to it, you can do this with just one, just the way it works on the camera. So you'd have the ground goes to the ground on the switch, and then the switch would have 2 cables coming out of it, or 2 places to solder on. One would correspond with the half press, and the other one would correspond with the full press, depending on how far it goes down. Obviously that's a lot neater version and how it basically works in these remote releases, but sometimes you might want to separate them like I do, or you might want to make something custom that just doesn't exist. The bracket part itself is just made out of some stainless steel pieces that I have. In fact, this is the same stainless steel that I made those dragonflies out of. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up Spice One. I'll put a card. I am aware this side isn't bent down quite as much. I don't really care. It actually puts it in the perfect place, slightly differently to the other one, and it looks neat enough, you know, from the side. and it's not really about looks. But yeah, as you can see, 2 cables to 1, down to the plug. And what I've done with this is I've used heat shrink on here and then on here, and it's heat shrinked all the way along, and then I've used smaller and smaller heat shrinks to come down onto this cable here. This is actually a Cena headset jack lead that I had, but it's, you know, they're the same for everything. Now, I didn't explain this in the video because it's already going to be complex enough if you don't get electronics and you want to make something like this, because anyone can make this if you can just use a soldering iron. I did something slightly different and a bit neater here. This is the way I've actually done it, and obviously it's not that much more complicated, but it seemed more complicated to explain this way, but this is the way I've done it for neatness. These are the 2 switches. Obviously we have the positive, or the red one from each one, goes full length down to the plug. We need a ground to go down there, and obviously we could send both grounds all the way down and have 4 cables going all the way to the end, or we can do what I did, which was just send one of them down, and then I made a little nick in it there, shortened the other ground, wrapped it around, soldered it in place, heat shrinked everything, so there's only 3 cables going down to the plug at the end, but it's got everything we need for it to work without using excess cable and making it bulkier than it needs to be. I know this is an overly long video for what is essentially a switch, but some people aren't naturally good at electronics or don't know anything about them. That's partly why I showed you the switch at the beginning, because people watching this who will understand how simple it is will have seen that like I did and go, oh yeah, I get it. And then they're like, whoa, you literally could make that as long as you wanted. You could have different ways of triggering it. You could make intervalometers of your own. There's all sorts of different things you could do. So I've tried to make this video for people that have no idea and people that have a good idea. People who really know probably won't be watching this video. So I'm hoping I won't get any comments from people going, this is too long and overcomplicated, blah, blah, blah. The other thing I suspect people will say is, well, why didn't you mount those switches into the grip here? And that was my initial idea, which is why I wanted really small switches. I took this apart, as in this handle, and although it does come into 2 halves, this top piece is completely glued on. So it was going to be a case of possibly breaking this to try and make it. You can also then have the problem, which is for neatness, I'd want the cable coming across, you know, zip tied under here, but if it's mounted in here and zip tied here, I can't get this frame apart. In its current configuration, even with this switch on, I can still take this off and it just comes with it. Well, there you go. If you want a custom shutter release of some sort for your rig, or there is something you do... I mean, I did think, actually, for some people who do animation, you might not want a tiny little button like this. You might want one of those, like, big, like, BAM buttons, or something like that, which you could wire together. You can literally turn anything into anything. I mean, technically, you could solder 2 spoons together and touch them and take pictures that way. Like, the possibilities are endless. I hope someone found that useful, or at least someone watching this is like, that was interesting. And if you did, please hit the like button. You're at the end of the video, so you must have liked it, pretty much. If you'd like to subscribe to this channel, please do. As I say, I make lots of different content, mostly to do with motorcycles and things, but check it out, I've got all sorts of stuff. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please consider doing that through Patreon. I would very much appreciate that, especially as I've just broken this to do. It's not broken, I'm going to fix it. I'd appreciate the support. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.